C11 everywhere. In August of 2001, I kept seeing 11, or I would doodle at work 11. I would keep seeing 11 everywhere. It was driving me nuts. I kept dreaming about plane crashes, and I could feel the heat and smell smoke and strange smell. I discovered the smell was of burning flesh. The week of September leading up to 9/11, I was getting sick, and then I decided to go to the hospital. I was so sick, I thought at first I had the stomach flu, as I could not keep anything down. While sleeping in the hospital, I woke up screaming, and then I asked the nurse, "Has something terrible happened?" And the nurse told me yes. 2 airplanes crashed in the Twin Towers in New York City. In one of my dreams, I was in one of the planes and I could see the skyline. Since I've never been to New York, I don't recognize anything. I had this dream, or one similar one, from August 2001 to September 10th, 2001. The illness was getting progressively worse, and that night of September 10th, called a taxi and went to St. Paul's Hospital, a hospital in Vancouver. I thought I was going to die. I was admitted, tests that were done, and I was put on an IV. I woke with a sick taste in my mouth, like I had smoke in my mouth. I was very sick that night, but in the morning I was better, almost like I wasn't sick at all. I thought at first I was still dreaming, but I saw the same images in my dream so many times, but I didn't realize what I was dreaming was real, and it was a warning. I still don't write down my dreams, but now I tend to feel things like 2004 tsunamis. I felt it again, and was getting sicker than a dog for a few days before that. I am currently up from being woken up from a nightmare of another disaster. I'm not sure when, but it's close. It's now October 12, 2009, so at least this one is documented. Did something touch my leg in the shower? Earlier today, August 21st, around 1 p.m., I was in the shower at my dad's house, ready to have some chocolate chip pancakes for breakfast. After I washed my hair, I put the shampoo bottle back up, and it fell over and popped open. I sat down on a ledge that was built in the shower to grab the bottle, and I started closing the bottle. After about 30 seconds of struggling to put the bottle cap back on because everything was wet, I felt something touch my leg. Now, this wasn't a gentle breeze like I scraped it against something. This was like 4 fingers pushing deep into my thigh. It was there for 3 seconds or so, and then it stopped. There was no object around me that could have done this. I should say that my neighbor, who lived in a different section of the house upstairs, died in June 2013. So after I told my dad about it, my dad said, "It was our neighbor probably doing it." There was no mark on my leg, and the second that the 4 fingers feel pushed into my outer thigh, I looked right where it was happening, and there was no mark, like my skin didn't groove down, like someone was pushing 4 fingers into me. It also didn't feel like it was a ghost. They weren't intending to hurt me. It was almost like they were trying to just get my attention. I was wondering if anyone has experienced that, or if there is a possible explanation for that, or maybe there was a ghost pushing 4 fingers into me? I think we have a ghost. My husband and I just bought a house this past August. It's our first and we love it. I'm typically sensitive to things paranormal, and during our house hunt, I passed up a few good houses due to getting that feeling when we went on the walkthroughs. This house seemed totally normal and fine. No one had ever died in it, so I thought I was making a safe bet. All was fine and normal until one night. My husband had to stay late at work, not too late, but he didn't get home until dark. As I was standing in the kitchen and preparing the animals' dinner, we have 2 cats and a dog, I got pushed. Almost like something had jumped on me. It didn't feel malicious or evil, just it felt playful. I shrugged it off, and then my husband walked through the door moments later. I didn't mention it to him. The rest of the night was uneventful, and we went to bed. Something we had both noticed, though, was that even though all the animals were in bed with us, we would hear clicking in the hallway. We have all tile or hardwood floors, so naturally, the dog's nails click on the floor when he walks. but we checked and he was in bed with us, so were the cats. We went out in the hallway and checked. Nothing. So we went back to bed, rinse and repeat almost every night since we've moved. My husband is not a believer in such things, so he always says, "Don't worry, it's a new house to us. We don't know its noises yet." It put my mind at ease enough to sleep. Again, nothing has felt malicious or evil, so it wasn't keeping me up at night. One Saturday, I ran to store to grab something, so my husband was alone at home for about 30 minutes. When I came back, he told me that while I was gone, he kept hearing noises, like something rummaging through a drawer or a box. Every time he went to investigate, nothing. All the animals were asleep on the bed or on the floor. I told him I had a similar experience a couple days prior, and I'd also found nothing disturbed. By about 3 weeks into living in our house, my animals started acting weird. Well, they were acting weird before, but I assumed it was due to the move. We had never moved with them, so it would naturally freak them out. However, this behavior was odd, even considering they were possibly still getting used to the house. My animals followed me every move now. Whenever I went, they went. Now, my fellow pet owners may say, "Yeah, they love you, your pets do that." But they were following me so closely all the time, I was tripping on them. Every time I sat down, they gathered around me and sat with their backs to me, watching, waiting. They acted like they were protecting me from something. My animals normally did always hang out with me prior to moving, but normally they never felt comfortable being so close to each other at all times. At week 4, I was done unpacking completely and found our crucifix. Again, my husband isn't a believer, but hanging up that crucifix even made him feel a little better. Our animals panicked every time we left the house. It broke my heart, but I had to go to work. One day I came home and again was making the animals dinners, and I started hearing a scratching noise on the cabinet beside me. It was the cabinet where I stored the animal food. The animals were waiting patiently by their bowls, as usual. The noise continued, and then the cabinet started to be pried open. I closed the cabinet. The scratching stopped. It was a really weird experience. Then the drawer behind me opened. I went and closed the drawer. I was starting to panic. I asked out loud for whatever was here to please stop. Nothing. I went to bed early that night, freaked out. I didn't sleep much. In the middle of the night, I felt something large jump on the side of the bed and nudge me. I could feel breathing. I felt it lick my ear. I was terrified and kept my eyes closed, praying it was a dream. My dog is small, and the cats are definitely not big enough to do that. Again, though this thing didn't feel evil, it kept licking my ear, and I realized it felt playful again. I sat up in bed. There was nothing. Animals were on edge and staring at my side of the bed, though. My husband was asleep, but he woke up when I sat up. He asked what was wrong, and I said nothing, just that I thought I heard something. He got up and decided to get a glass of water. On the way back, I hear him walking. He drops his glass and screams, "Whoa, what the fuck?" I was jumped out of bed and started to run to the door, but he ran in and closed it, almost knocking me over. What's wrong?" I asked, almost yelling. He told me he had just seen a dog, about 50 pounds, standing in the hallway, and then it started running at him, then just disappeared. My husband is already very pale, but at this moment, I swear he was glowing in the dark. He was really freaked out. I decided to tell him all the things I had been experiencing, and it was all coming together. The sounds, the jumping, the increased activity right before animal meal time. We had a dog ghost. I tried to console him and remind him it wasn't evil. He said it was impossible for there to be a ghost at all, but a dog ghost was too crazy. He settled on my mind was playing tricks on me, and I'm very tired. So we finally went back out to the hallway and cleaned up the glass, then went back to bed. The next night, all the animals were in bed with us again, and we hear a growl. Our dog is right next to us, and we know his growl. This was not him. All the animals ran out to the hallway. The dog was still barking, and the cats were hissing and yowling. The sounds of a scuffle ensued, and it definitely sounded like there was a larger fourth participant. I got up, went out to the hallway to break it up. They were all fixated on the same spot in the hallway, and once I calmed them down and brought them back to bed, the unfamiliar noises ended for the night. Even if my husband didn't believe, I was sure we had a dog ghost, silly as it may sound. The next day, I saw my neighbor outside and decided to ask about the previous owners and if they had a dog. She said they did, but it got out a lot and was aggressive towards the neighborhood pets. It apparently bit and killed a dog across the street, an elderly dog, a poodle. They filed a complaint. The dog was forced to be euthanized. Shortly after that, they decided to move. Having some answers, I told my husband about it. At least I knew now, and I wasn't really scared anymore. We continued to hear some clicking noises, and the dog continued jumping on me while I fed my animals, as if to say, "Don't forget me next." I finally decided to ask the neighbor what the dog's name was. She told me. So I started saying his name. It seemed to calm him down. Last night, though, we had another incident, but this time, someone got hurt. We heard the growling again. It definitely wasn't our dog. It didn't sound too aggressive. It sounded like a play growl, like the sound dogs make when they're playing with a toy. My dog jumps off the bed, cats following, and they run to the living room. And another scuffle. I get up to break it up again, and then a yelp from my dog. I run to the living room. The cat's fur is all on the end and puffy, and my dog is laying down, licking a wound on his front leg. I rush to him, and he has a bite wound, as if from another dog. It was certainly not a cat bite or a scratch. I clean him off and bandage him up. My husband is thoroughly freaked out and wants to call the police, but nothing is here, no one but us. It would be stupid, I told him. We searched the house and backyard, nothing. All the doors and windows were locked too. Even the door that leads to the garage was locked. We all go back to bed, and none of us really sleep that night. I've had experiences with human ghosts, but I've never been haunted by a dog. I don't know what to do. I now fear for my animal safety when I leave. I hate going to work this morning. I almost called in, but it would have felt silly. I couldn't believe physical harm was done. I have since picked up all toys and put them away until further notice. I feel bad, but I think the toys started the fight. With Halloween approaching, I'm just scared that something to one of my pets will happen. I don't know how I'll sleep tonight, or if any of my pets will either. Banshee visits an Irish countryside. I've got a few experiences of my own, mostly from after we moved houses. I live in Ireland to the country. We live in a bungalow in the Midlands. I had my own room, box room, nothing fancy, with a bunk bed up against the wall, to the right of the door, and the window on the far left side of the opposite wall. These bits are relevant. I'll explain it in a bit. One night in August 2000, I was 8 years old. Would have been late in the night. I woke up and looked out the window. From what I know now, it was the Banshee. Some people might be dubious. They have their own opinions from what I saw. It corresponds to previous accounts. My grandpa had a similar one, but by a sandy mount. The Banshee was like a fluorescent yellow, brushing its hair and floating. That's what got me. Kept coming towards the window. Had its mouth open, flesh missing in parts of the face, and it wore what looked like a dress or a nightdress. Anywho, I saw this coming towards the window and was stuck, half amazement and fear. Thinking back to it, it felt like I was being beckoned, some innate feeling of needing to wait. Only when I realized that it was approaching the window did I bawl out for the folks. A few days later, a friend of my parents died. Heart attack on his tractor. We then moved a few years later to my mom's family home. Folks bought it. A few years ago, my dad and myself went into the house, having been outside. We both heard someone run from the top of the stairs, across the landing and towards my folks' room. It was child's footsteps. My brother was only young, but still able to climb stairs, so we thought, crap, maybe it's him or my younger sister. Turned out they were both still inside the car. When we moved into the house initially, my parents told us the story of how one night in the room below them, they heard children singing Ring a Ring a Rosie and laughing. There's been some crazy stuff. Pipes smoked by the old fireplace. Flashes of something in the corner of your eye and our shed. I've got a homemade gym, and man, there's something not right about it. I've had another encounter last year with what I reckon is the Banshee. We have an old mobile home we gave to my grandparents years back when they came to stay with us. I use it to study, and when university exams come around, this time, I was working out there, working away on the laptop with some music playing. I heard some whining and wailing in the background. In fairness, This mobile home isn't in the greatest shape, is missing a second front window, and we do have cats. The only thing is, this wasn't like the cats wailing, as I've heard them before. It was mournful. As you can expect, the volume went up, and I sat it until it eventually dissipated. The following day, a local man who lives on a hill we can see from the house died. It's funny, I was talking to my sister last week, and she reminded me, a few years ago, I went to the States around July. She remembers waking up one night and looking out her bedroom door. It's a box room that's quite continuous with a landing. She looked out and saw this figure, pale white, mouth open, gazing in at her from the window next to my bedroom door. Needless to say, she doesn't like the window. Again, a neighbor died the following day. One more, and I'll leave you to it. My grandpa died in '06. A few weeks later, I was in the sitting room reading paper when I felt a pinch on my back. Checked the mirror, and there were nail marks in the skin. Funny thing was, my grandpa used to do it a lot to me as a kid. Plus, we were really close. My home is an 18th century Georgian farmhouse, so it's got the works. Just to say, I found paranormal stuff interesting, primarily due to a deep family history of such activity, particularly with the area where my house is located, as well as the house itself. I'm skeptical generally, trained as a cynical scientist, and am eager to counter the usual, "oh, it's a ghost" cliché. But living where I am, and from what I've experienced, leads me to wholly believe such is real. Something is definitely in my bedroom. Hello, internet friends. So, let me give you some background about my situation. First of all, I live in a retired convent building in California. The building existed as an active convent for many years. I believe from the 1890s through maybe the 1980s, something like that. Anyways, I did a service year program, and members of this group live in this old convent as community housing. We all have private bedrooms on the second level, as well as bathrooms and a community room. The church still uses the first floor for some office and meeting rooms, and our laundry and kitchen facilities are also on that floor. The house is fine, not glamorous, not in a great area, and it's old. So it's hot as shit in the summer and cold as shit in the winter. But other than that, it's fine. So, like day one, I moved in, I got some weird feelings by the staircase at the end of the house. The one that leads to the basement and upstairs, cushioned between a bedroom and the main hallway and the laundry room. One of my roommates tells me, after I tell him of this weird vibe, that he, as well as about 5 other people that have lived there, have visually seen a little girl hang out in that exact area. On top of this, everyone is kind of a jokingly way believes that the house to be a little more haunted, or have a little more of unexplained activity than we thought. Now, all that being said, I personally and thankfully have never visually seen any sort of ghost in the house. However, my room has some weird stuff going on. I moved in around August of 2014. I was with my ex at the time, who was over a lot. There were instances where we'd both be asleep, and I would spring awake because I felt like someone was watching me. I get this feeling pretty frequently when in my room, and I feel that when he wasn't there, it was still happening, but felt safer when I slept with him. One night, he left around 11:30 as he had class the next day. He tucked me in, waited for me to fall asleep, lit some candles up on my dresser as a calming nightlight, and I fell asleep. I woke up at some point because I thought my boyfriend was still in my room. I felt someone sit at the edge of my bed. I look up and called on my boyfriend's name to find no one there. I called him immediately and asked how long he left, thinking it might have been him, but snuck out before I woke up. Nothing. He had left a half hour before and was already basically at his house. This was one of the bigger experiences I've had. Continuously, though, I would wake up feeling someone watching me, standing over me at the edge of the bed, standing over me next to my head, and more recently, I actually started hearing things, and that's what got me on edge. I heard someone saying something the other night, and then last night I heard something too, and it startled me and looked around, but I saw nothing. I've done sage, holy water, I lit candles. I have a stone that protects me, but am wondering what else I can do. I haven't had anything violent, but I really do believe there is something going on, and definitely, personally, in my room. Anyone have anything similar on this level? And any advice on what this could be? My flat may be haunted. I've been living in my flat for just over a year now, and both my friend and I have experienced some unusual occurrences. We're university students in England, living in a 3-story Georgian tourist house, which have been converted into 6 flats. The odd things happen semi-frequently, sporadically enough to shock us when they happen, but frequent enough for us to have realized something is strange here. I figured I'd make a note of everything that has happened so far. The first unusual experience happened August 2015, I believe. I'd only been moved in a matter of weeks. I went to the bathroom one morning for my usual routine. After brushing my teeth, I returned my toothbrush to the post sat on the shelf fixture, which is adjacent to the sink. There's a decent gap between the shelf and the sink, 4 feet or so. I was facing the mirror at the sink for a couple seconds, and then was hit in the back by a tin flying off the shelf. The tin is an old lunchbox, but it's hollow, so it didn't hurt. It just made me jump 10 feet and shit my pants. I know I couldn't have knocked it off. I was too far away from the shelf. Also, it was like the tin had lifted up and off into my back, as the row of tea-light candles in front of it hadn't been knocked off. I remember thinking it was too early for this shit, and I just went back to my room and tried not to dwell on it. The next thing to happen involved towels, and both me and my flatmate had experienced it. My experience with the towels happened before my flatmate, but I decided not to tell her so she wouldn't be scared. It was the weekend and I was alone in the flat, and I just went to the toilet as per usual, washed and dried my hands and left. I went again later in the day and noticed that the fresh towel I had put up the day before was gone. I didn't think much of it, just dried my hands on my shirt and left. In the evening, I went to the toilet again, only to find that a dirty towel I had put in the washing machine was hung up on the peg. I freaked out at this point. No one else was in the flat, and I certainly hadn't done this. A week or so later, my flatmate and I had been on a night out. I'd been sick the night before, and my flatmate had passed me the bathroom hand towel to wipe my face on. Gross, I know. In the morning, she replaced the dirty towel with a fresh one, and put the dirty towel in the washing machine. Then she experienced what I had. The fresh towel disappeared on her second visit, and on her third, the sticky towel was hung up on the peg. She came to me, and I assured her it wasn't me, and that the same thing had happened while she was away the week prior. Since then, things had happened more sporadically. I'd had makeup go missing from my makeup box, makeup which I've never found, and my flatmates swear she didn't borrow, but that was about it. Strange activity seems to resume over the summer. This summer, I stayed in the flat instead of going back home. My flatmate wasn't with me. One day, I went to have some Marmite on toast to find the jar was missing, which was unusual as I'd had some the day prior. 2 days later, I found the jar had been put in the cupboard under the kitchen sink. I'm positive I didn't do that. And on another day, I returned home from a music gig to find that my freezer door was wide open and that everything inside had defrosted. I hadn't been in the freezer in days. On another occasion, my ex told me he'd gone into the bathroom to find the taps on full blast. I've also had books that have been stable and untouched for weeks fall off my flatmate's bookcase while I've been in my bedroom. Since my flatmate had returned, strange activity continues. We've both caught a tiny glimpse of a figure standing in the bathroom recently. All I could notice was that it was a male figure wearing a white button-up shirt. Like I say, it was a glimpse for a fraction of a second, and it could be my imagination for all I know. Last week, I felt as though a presence stood behind me while I sat lengthways on the sofa in the lounge, almost right up to my shoulder and face. I got a faint smell of men's aftershave. Turned around, but obviously no one was there. I told my flatmate about this, and she shrugged it off as it being my ex's. I knew it wasn't him, as he never wore aftershave. He smelled of Lush as he worked there. He'd also not been in my flat for 3 weeks, and no other man had been for months. Plus, the smell left as soon as it came. I sniffed every throw-in cushion in the room, but could not find the source of the smell. Now, My flatmate is less skeptical, as she's experienced the same thing when she was in the lounge. She described the smell as being like lynx axe, but I feel like it was a little more adult or refined than lynx, you know? As you can see, nothing extreme has happened, and I don't get bad vibes from my flat. I feel totally at ease here, in the spite of the odd things which have happened. This leads me to believe this could be a good spirit who has no ill intent. I feel no desire to investigate or stir, or to try and make this potential spirit pass on. I currently feel safe and mostly at ease. Up till the start of this semester, I believed the presence could be female or young, as my makeup had been going missing, and the nature of activity seemed playful. But after the aftershave smell and the male figure, I'm not so sure. I'll keep this updated anyways. Ghost in my basement. It was a week ago, August 4, 2012, when I began to notice some things that were off about my house. Everywhere I went, I felt like I was being watched. I never felt like this before. When I brought it up to my parents and siblings, they thought I was joking. They didn't feel like this, and yet, while we were talking, I felt like there was something sitting on the floor next to my chair. I managed to ignore this feeling for several hours, but it suddenly began to intensify at around 9 p.m. This began to freak me out, so I went to bed early, not wanting to feel like that anymore. But the feeling followed me to my room. It took me almost 3 hours to fall asleep, and even then my dreams were haunted by that feeling. Almost like I could feel it watching me even when I was sleeping. For the next week, I kept getting that feeling, but eventually I got used to that feeling. I thought that maybe this had something to do with electromagnetic fields. I knew that some people were sensitive to them, and I wondered if this had anything to do with the fact that lately my family had been using a lot more electronics, such as our air conditioner, 4 laptops, 3 TVs in a separate room, and several gaming systems, but that thought left my mind on August 11th. It was around 9 p.m. again, the time when the feeling of being watched seemed to intensify, and it was hot in the living room where I was watching TV. I walked down into the basement to go and get an ice cream sandwich, but as I approached the freezer, I noticed something black on the wall. And it was moving. I stood in one place, frozen in shock and not knowing what to do. I watched in shock as the black mass became larger, and it only took me a few more seconds to realize that something was actually walking out of the wall. After a few moments, the black mass had taken on the shape of a large man. Slowly, I backed away from this apparition, not knowing whether this was just a ghost or a demonic entity, and I didn't really want to stay to find out. As I backed up, though, the apparition walked forward, keeping pace with me, so that the distance between us stayed the same. I backed up against the wall, too scared to make a break for the door in case this apparition attacked. I stared silently at the ghost, then noticed something odd. Whatever this thing was, it didn't feel angry or evil. It actually felt sad. As I realized this, the black mass faded away to nothing, like smoke being blown away by the wind. I remained where I was for a few seconds, too frightened to move, then rushed back up the stairs out of the basement. Somehow, I knew that whatever that apparition was, that was what had been watching me for the past week. But I wasn't scared of it anymore. I was merely curious, and even felt a small pang of pity for it. It seemed to be filled with sorrow, and wondered whether this was for some reason that he couldn't move on to the other side, or whether he was staying behind for a certain reason. But I knew, with my curiosity, I wouldn't let it be a mystery for too long. I would find a way to figure out why that ghost is so sad, somehow. I think this may be someone who died in my house, possibly, who may be watching over me. But I also slightly believe that this may be a malevolent being, and I'm curious about what other people think about this. I want to know whether I should be afraid of this being or not. The woman's voice and my stepdad's brother Henry. My name is Jessica. I am now 19 years old, and this is my first story. My mom and dad divorced, but were separated when I was about 4 years old. My mom met my stepdad when I was 3 and was moving in with him by my 5th birthday. We moved into a brand new house. We were the first owners. Just to jump ahead a bit, we lived there as a family for about 10 years. My mom was having a field day in this new place, decorating, moving the furniture, and while my stepdad was at work, we moved in the first week of August. I know the exact date as my stepdad's birthday is August 4th. My mom, me, and my older brother went to the animal shelter and bought my stepdad a cat for his birthday. So it seemed like everything was fine. We were living a great life. Everything was so superb, or so we thought, at least. Everything was calm for the first few years of living in this brand new house. The bills were caught up. The family was stronger than ever. My mom and stepdad had just bought a new mini caravan. You know, the ones before there were doors on both sides. We were all doing great. I'm telling you these stories as my mom told them to me. She said, the life was great in the beginning. Well, it all really starts when I started 5th grade in this new place. If you think 5th grade, 10 years old, we moved in right before my 5th birthday, so it took a decade to start its talent. My mom had a strict bedtime routine for me and my brother and for school. 8 o'clock every night, we were on schedule, even on weekends. After all, I was 10 and he was 12. I remember I had a canopy bed with a pink Minnie Mouse Disney sheets. I didn't have a ceiling fan then. The only air coming in and out of my room was through the air vents on the floor, or when the door would open or close. The top of my bed always swayed. It was almost like air was being forced through, kind of like the fabric of the canopy. That's really nothing. My bed would sometimes jolt by itself, and that would creep me out. I had a very weird bed. After all, my parents bought it for me at a yard sale and estate sale. We bought my brother's bed for the same sale, and he would sometimes complain of the bed moving. When we got our first family computer, we had okay internet service in 2000. I was 10 and my stepdad was a truck driver, so he would always work late. Usually it was just me, my mom, and my brother at home. Well, 8 o'clock came around, and like clockwork, my brother and I settled into our beds. One night in particular, I heard a woman's voice coming from what sounded like my closet. I immediately thought it was my mother who liked to stay up late playing internet games, until my stepdad who came home. So I got out of bed and I went into our living room, and I asked my mom had she wanted from me. Why did she call my name? She looked all confused and said something along the lines of, I didn't call you, go back to bed. So, knowing in the back of my head that yes, I did hear a woman calling my name, I reluctantly went to bed. My mom had a stillborn in 1999 and immediately got pregnant again with my brother Ben, who will be 9 in February '09. He was born in 2000 at 2:22 a.m., February 2nd, and he weighed 8 pounds 2 ounces. Born on Tuesday at 22 inches long. He was a great joy to my family. Ben was the stepdad's first and only birth child. He is still overjoyed to this day. When Ben was almost 2, my stepdad's brother Henry, I think his name was, passed away. My brother Robert went to live with my dad and stepmom in 2002, so late at night, it was just me and my brother and mom until my stepdad got home. Well, my mom had just sat Ben and me down for dinner. Now across the dining room table is a hallway, which leads to my room at the end of it. The bathroom is to the left, and Ben's room and Robert's old room to the right. Ben was sitting in his high chair directly in front of the hallway. My mom put his little plate and kid-proof fork in front of him, and he dug in. He put his head up and looked into the hallway. He then tilted his head like a dog does when you do something weird in front of them. Ben told my mom, who was sitting to his left, that he saw Daddy in the doorway. Then, as if he looked for a second time, he turned his head to my mom and said, "No, Mommy, that's not Daddy, but it's a man who looks like Daddy in the doorway of Sissy's room." Me being Sissy, which means sister. My mom and me looked at each other at the same time, then leaned over to look in the doorway. Then out of nowhere, Ben started cracking up laughing. He squirmed around as if he wanted to get out of his high chair, so my mom picked up his plate and let him down. He went straight to the hall and switched the hallway light on, and stumbled over to the doorway of my room. He reached his hands up high and started giggling. Me and my mom were shocked at what we were seeing. The next day, Saturday, my brother Robert had come over from my dad's house. My stepdad received phone calls saying that his brother Henry had died. The caller was Joe's sister Mary. I guess Mary had asked Joe that if he had any pictures of Henry to bring them up to their house, because they were putting together a slideshow for Henry's funeral. So Joe and all of us started going through his shoe boxes and looking for old photos. Ben was not allowed to count himself out, so Joe opened up a photo book, and there on the first page was a picture of Henry. Joe wanted to look through the album before taking any pictures out. When Joe flipped the page, Ben shuddered. "Hold on, Daddy." Ben turned the page from page 2 to page 1, and then he started laughing. We all joined in the laughter, and Joe asked Ben, "Son, what is so funny?" Ben said, "Daddy, I know this man. He is the man I saw last night in Sissy's doorway." Well, that sure stopped the laughter. Me and my mom quickly turned to each other and shook our heads in shock. We told Joe about the night before and how Ben and I was just cutting up laughing in the doorway of my room. It's freaky what babies can see, what we cannot see. So, that was a highlight of 2002. There's so many stories to tell you each year in that house, like the footsteps you always heard, and how I would never be in that house alone. And for some reason, I always wanted my little brother to sleep in my room at night. Robert moved back in, and instead of the boys sharing a room, I had Ben's toddler bed put in my room and we shared it. Also, my brother loved having a space. Well, this is a long story. I have so many more to tell from 10 years to now 19 years old. From Florida to Michigan. I now live in Michigan with my husband Ryan. I will get them here. I promise you. Thank you for reading, and wait for my next true stories to come out.